Welcome to Stat Masters, where we teach you how to use Player Profiler to win at fantasy football and better evaluate players. My name is Aaron Stewart, and I'm a senior analyst for Player Profiler. My co-host is Chris Bonagura, a fantasy intelligence network analyst for Player Profiler. Chris, who are we talking about today?
So I figured this is a good time to look back and reflect and take a look at how players we've talked about have moved and how the evaluation changes as cost changes. So we're actually using a tool from 4for4 today. It's a free tool. 4for4 is definitely also a quality site. We will cross-reference with some Player Profiler stats. And Player Profiler does have a tool that shows you change in average draft position over time, but it's really only one player at a time, and I just kind of want to get a broad look at all of them. So I'm going to use the 4for4 tool today. And there's been a lot of change. So we're going to look from May 1st to just after the NFL draft until today. I figure May 1st because that's going to give you the truest look of how ADP finalized just as the NFL draft happened, and then the change over the last 2 months. Before we get into specific players, I think it's really important to look at one of the biggest changes, and that is the death of the zero RB approach on underdog, and death in the sense that it's become so mainstream that wide receiver ADP as a whole has become so minus EV across positions that you have to be far more selective with receivers in the early round. Where a 4 to 5 early receiver build used to be much more viable, we're getting to a point where anything more than 3 receivers and you're losing value at other positions. If you look in the last 2 months, every single receiver, with the exception of maybe 4 or 5, has increased in ADP over the last 2 months. On this tool, a minus number shows value lost. So minus 2.6 spots for CeeDee Lamb means CeeDee Lamb is now 2.6 spots more expensive. His current ADP is more expensive than his old one. So the minus numbers are an increase. But if you go down this list here, of the top 20, they've all moved up. They're just inching up 2 or 3 spots. Then Keenan Allen's the first big riser. He's moved up a full round and a half. And you keep going down. And Terry McLaurin's up 10 spots. Brandon Ayuk is now firmly entrenched in the mid-5th round, up a whole round. Chris Godwin is also in that mid-5th round, gone up also a round. I see him in the 4th round sometimes. Marquise Brown up a round and a half. The big one, Diontae Johnson, is flirting with up almost 2 full rounds. And then you go down the list. Jordan Addison up a round and a half. Jahan Dotson up 15 spots, right? Elijah Moore up 2 full rounds. Quentin Johnston up 2 full rounds. Every single one, down to even Tyler Boyd. The top 50, all up 20 plus spots. You look at the next grouping of 50 of receivers, and still massive rises in ADP with, Zay Jones up 14 spots, Romeo Doubs, Michael Gallup up 36 spots. It's kind of crazy that wide receiver is plowing along this strong, and it's just giving you value that wasn't previously there at other positions. So the first one I want to talk about is Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce is a guy that up until about a week ago, I was very unwilling to draft, but I'm now happy to do so. Aaron, tell us about Dameon Pierce while I pull up Underdog.
Dameon Pierce, he feels disgusting, right? In fact, one of our early episodes of Stat Masters, we were all aboard Devin Singletary. So we were like, hey, you know what? The Texans had nobody but Dameon Pierce to have all the workload. If you go to opportunity metrics for Dameon Pierce, he was, as a rookie, one of the top guys there. He was number 6 in total opportunity share. In weighted opportunities, he didn't catch as many passes, but he was still top 20 as a rookie running back. But then bringing in Devin Singletary, who in a 4-year career with the Buffalo Bills had been a proven capable running back of scoring fantasy points. We were off on Dameon Pierce early in the process, but now what we've seen is everyone's hopped on Devin Singletary and bumped up his ADP significantly. Whereas this awesome tool for 4for4, we could see that since the start of May, Dameon Pierce has gone down half a round, and there's still value, right? Like, because he will slide further than that just because his ADP is down 5 to 6 spots. That really means he's sliding down furthermore in order to bring his average draft position down. And with Pierce, recently in a player profiler best ball draft, like I got him in the 6th round. And initially my gut reaction was going, this feels disgusting, until it's like, no, I actually got him much later than his ADP. And he still accomplishes the things that we look for. He's still going to get touches. Devin Singletary's not going to come and take all the work from Pierce. We're going to see less work, but I'm still confident the opportunity share can remain in the top 20 amongst running backs in 2023. And snap share maybe drops a little bit, but it's like people, they just overthink these things. Ultimately, at its core, fantasy football is about touches. Volume is key, right? Dameon Pierce is going to get volume. People are overlooking the upside. Like, he only scored 5 touchdowns last season. He could still hit that even with Singletary being in this backfield.
Go up. Part of the reason we like Ramondre Stevenson is that even though he only scored 5 touchdowns, there's probably more. Right now, Stevenson obviously showed a lot more, but Pierce too, like you were saying, the 220 rush attempts, that probably stays at the very least. It could go up, and Devin Singletary also eat, because like Rex Burkhead got a ton of work last year. There's other work available. The argument against Pierce was, if you look at the efficiency metrics, he's just not necessarily efficient. I think the comp to Chris Carson is a very true comp, and this is kind of like a new Chris Carson. And previously, early 6th round to late 5th round Chris Carson was a tough pick, but that's because of who you had to pick him around. If you look at Pierce now, he's still in around the same spot among running backs, which that was never the issue we had. The issue was who you had to take Pierce before. Now, all those players that I liked before Pierce go before Pierce, right? So I don't have to worry about taking Pierce before Diontae Johnson anymore, right? Or taking him before a guy like Marquise Brown and these other receivers and players at other positions that went after him. And Singletary now just goes up. And as Singletary goes up, he's up a full round now. Every spot he moves up, you lose value on what our original point was, that this is a super late player who has some role. But as Pierce goes down and Singletary goes up, Pierce's upside case looks better, and Singletary's floor case starts to manifest itself more. The takes are the same, but now that the price has changed, my willingness has changed. Did I miss anything there?
I think that's well said. And I think even just looking right now as we record at underdog ADP, at running backs and receivers, and seeing Dameon Pierce like neck and neck with Treylon Burks. Come on. There's no value in drafting Treylon Burks over Dameon Pierce. There isn't. And I'm not a Dameon Pierce guy, but at his current ADP, I'm suddenly finding myself becoming a Dameon Pierce guy. Look at these guys that he's going around. Like, it's crazy that Jordan Addison is now a difference of 3 spots, a rookie receiver that also dealt with an injury earlier in training camp, that he is now in Kadarius Toney range. This is insane. Like, this is where we want Dameon Pierce the entire time. It's a great spot.
Just watch and monitor. If he stays there and keeps falling, he's draftable. I'm not going crazy, but he's now draftable. He's on my radar. And if tides shift and he goes back to the 5th round, I'm back out. It's the cost is good. Now you look at some other changes. There's some crazy ones, especially at running back after receiver. The way that receiver has now affected these other position groups. So like Mixon is flying up the board. He's up 30 picks, 2.5 rounds, because news seems to have improved on him. And Mixon's getting to a point where you've lost a lot of value in drafting him. He's not completely undraftable, but your Mixon teams don't look as good. He was always a good pick before. And then you have players falling. Kenneth Walker's down 21 spots. Typically, you're going to find the most success when you just chase the guys falling down massively for bad reasons and avoid the guys being driven up for no reason. Now, in a case like Mixon and Madison, I wouldn't call it no reason. I think their price was wrong and their current price is still appropriate, but as it gets higher, you have to be cautious. Kenneth Walker, we always knew some other competition was going to come in. He just gets more draftable as he falls. Miles Sanders is falling, and nothing's changed. literally nothing's changed, and Miles Sanders just falls for no reason. Just draft him as he falls. DeAndre Swift is falling, but there's a decent reason for that. The next big one is Isiah Pacheco. If you've listened to us, this has probably been one of our most hated on players for the last 2 months, but Isiah Pacheco is finally at a point where I can pepper him onto teams. Still not obsessed with him, and I still want to see him fall further, but he was at pick 69. He was an early 6th-round pick. You were picking between Isiah Pacheco, Michael Pittman, and George Kittle. That's an easy choice. You just don't take the fringe running back, but he's fallen a full round and a half, and he keeps falling. If you look at him among running backs and receivers, you're now picking between Pacheco, Brandon Cooks, Dalvin Cook, David Montgomery. That's a much better price. Those are much worse players you have to pick now, taking a fringier running back who could potentially see 250 carries on the Chiefs and maybe have good touchdown efficiency as he falls into the 8th round. And I've even seen him fall to the 9th round. That's a proposition I'm willing to bet on at that point. You're looking for him now to be a version of last year's Miles Sanders, right? Miles Sanders was an 8th to 9th round pick that got 250 carries, ran it for 1,000 yards, and scored 11 touchdowns. He ran hot, and he finished as the RB14. And even though he ran hot, but in the RB14 in the 9th round is a great pick. The RB14 at the 5-6 turn doesn't help you much. Doesn't win you a tournament at the very least. It's just kind of an okay pick, and Pacheco just had okay value. Now as he falls, I can certainly draft him. I think Pacheco being up against James Conner and David Montgomery in drafts, those are kind of comparable picks. I don't hate it anymore. Not my favorite pick, but he's at least draftable.
Nothing has changed about him as a player. We know exactly what he is. I know that there was people in the offseason that were hyping him to the moon because he's on the Kansas City Chiefs offense. That doesn't matter. The things that do matter are the stats, the wonderful stats we have at Player Profiler. We know what Pacheco is. First off, when we look at the workout metrics for Pacheco, obviously it catches your attention that he ran a 4.37, 99th percentile. He's got speed. He's got size. That's great. This was the reason that Player Profiler was correct on him in Dynasty. But then after a full season, we've seen how that has translated onto the football field. First off, he's not a pass catcher. He never was, never is, he won't ever be. His route participation for this season was 19.5%. He didn't qualify to rank on that, but it's not good, right? That's pretty abysmal. He barely topped 1 yard per route run. There's a reason that his route participation was low, that other running backs in the Chiefs' backfield got the passing game work. But Pacheco is good at making big explosive plays. Hey, that 5'10", 216-pound running back that ran a 4.37 was also RB27 in breakaway run rate. That's good. In a yards per touch, he was number 16 overall. That's great. There is some potential, and that's why when these players do start to slide, yeah, we might not like them. They could be viewed as flawed players. At their cost, you hit it perfectly when he's in the 6th round and you've still got great players on the board. You can't draft the running back that had a 2.3% target share. I know that underdogs have PPR, but still 2.3%, abysmal. But a running back that's now going a round and a half later and continuing to fall, that was number 16 in yards per touch, that has shown the ability as a rookie 7th round pick to break away and have massive plays. I liked that. And certainly those teams that you managed to get a Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce stack, you've got to discount Isiah Pacheco that you're able to stack with those guys as well and just get all the touchdowns with the Chiefs. And I love the comparison to Miles Sanders, right? Because Miles Sanders on an Eagles offense that was really good. He got 20 passes for 79 yards. Pacheco could put up similar numbers in the receiving game, and it won't matter. If he does what he does on the ground and he's shown to be a capable rusher and then add some touchdowns to that, like, yeah, at his cost, he's returning excellent value now.
Yeah, at the 5-6 turn, you have to have RB1 firmly in the range of outcomes. At the 8-9 turn, you just have to have RB2 firmly in the range of outcomes. It's completely different calculus for your upside case, and you always want your player exceeding where you drafted them. That's just common sense. And again, it's the falling for no good reason, and a big reason why a lot of ADPs have changed drastically in the last week and a half is because in the last 2 weeks, Underdog has put out about 5 side tournaments to Best Ball Mania 4, but they all share ADP as long as they're one quarterback season long format. They've put out multiple Chihuahuas, a Golden, a couple Dalmatians. They've put out tournaments that are either lower entry, so it brings in more casual players, or single entry, so when people draft them, they go a lot crazier for receiver because they feel like it's one and done. They don't take peripheral players as much. So when you see a guy like, so that's where you start seeing the honesty of how people feel about a guy. People were drafting Pacheco in the 6th round because, oh, well, I have 150 entries, maybe he's worth it. But when you bring in a casual player who doesn't care as much about fringe guys, they pass on him in the 6th round. And when you give a more experienced player a single entry into a tournament, they're not going to draft him in the 6th round, and you see him fall. So that's changed a lot of these ADPs, is this influx of other tournament styles and getting a little more honesty out of people. And for Pacheco, there's also a bit of Chiefs hesitancy all around because of rumors of Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins signings. And you also see it with like Dolphins players, with like Devon A-Chain and Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, people having hesitancy because of free agent signings that haven't even occurred. So that's also no good reason in my book. 2 players that have risen for not no good reason, but not enough of a reason for me to really continue to be in on them. And we already brought him up with Pierce. It's Diontae Johnson and Marquise Brown. I love Diontae Johnson and Marquise Brown, but now they're very rich for my blood. Marquise Brown is up to ADP of 59. He's firmly a 5th round pick, albeit the 5-6 turn. And Diontae Johnson is just behind him. He's a very early 6 round pick. Both these players started the offseason in the 7th round. They were much better values. They, along with all the other receivers, have had drastic increases in value, and it's certainly sapped the upside. Marquise Brown has gone up 15 spots because of the cutting of DeAndre Hopkins, but we've known for months DeAndre Hopkins was going to get cut. It wasn't a surprise or a secret. So that's why when he was at ADP 75, he was a great pick. And he's not a bad pick in the 5th round. Marquise Brown should always be a 5th round pick. He's a wide receiver too. But there are downsides to Marquise Brown this year. And as you increase players, again, in the 5th round, I need wide receiver 1 more firmly in the range of outcomes, or at least I need wide receiver 2 floor to be more established. And Marquise Brown works better as a wide receiver 2 upside shot in the 7th round than a 5th round. He's definitely a wide receiver 2. And Diontae Johnson belongs ahead of George Pickens by ADP, but he doesn't belong this far ahead of George Pickens by ADP. It's not even so much how he goes among receivers. I don't mind having him ahead of Lockett or Evans because they're aging, or the fringier sophomores and rookies, but it's now cross-positionally, right? You're taking Diontae Johnson now before Miles Sanders. You're taking Diontae Johnson now before George Kittle at times. George Kittle's only a few spots before him. I see him go before Michael Pittman. You know, it's tough to take him ahead of Michael Pittman, who's definitively a more talented player. It's tough to take him before George Kittle. He might not outscore George Kittle, and George Kittle gives you positional edge at tight end. Hard to take him before Miles Sanders, who could eclipse 200 fantasy points again this year. It's tough, and it makes other players more valuable. I'm starting to pass on these guys.
And both receivers, early in best ball drafts, some of my team builds, I could get either Marquise Brown or Diontae Johnson as my wide receiver 4, right? And I felt great. I'm like, boom, in the single QB tournaments, that's my flex play with the upside that you talked about. And their situation hasn't changed. Like, technically, sure, Marquise Brown's has changed, but if you're smart and paying attention to what's going to happen, you already knew Hopkins wasn't going to be there. You already hit that point. So, like, we weren't shocked on all these things, but now people are reacting to the obvious things. You have to be able to. I know it's going to sound impossible, but you've got to be able to predict the future. And you don't have to be super smart in football or fantasy football. At the core of it, it's just using logic and going, the NFL, it's a soap opera that happens every year. It's the same stories, just different actors, different characters. We've seen disgruntled receivers like DeAndre Hopkins move on from bad teams because it just didn't make sense. So the cost is brutal, because when you're drafting Marquise Brown, who's wide receiver 30, and Diontae Johnson, who's now wide receiver 33 in ADP, and you're getting him as wide receiver 4. Excellent. Now, when you look at just past seasons, on Player Profiler, one of the things I love to do is just looking at fantasy points per game. Like Marquise Brown, the past 2 seasons, he's been wide receiver 27 and wide receiver 21 in PPR points per game. Now he's being drafted as wide receiver 30. You're drafting him right where he's been hitting the last couple of seasons. There's no value. Diontae Johnson, everyone was out on him last year. He had a bad season, didn't score any touchdowns. He finishes wide receiver 39. The year before, wide receiver 8. We've talked about him on a previous episode. Bit of an outlier, but the year before, in 2020, wide receiver 22 in PPR, right? He's now wide receiver 33 in Underdog. Like, there's not a whole lot of value you're squeezing out of these picks anymore. They're not bad players.
They're not undraftable. It's just worse value. It's just worse value.
Exactly.
In the 7th round, Diontae Johnson concerns aren't a problem. In the 5th round, I need to worry that there's been 2 seasons where Diontae Johnson saw over 140 targets and didn't reach 1,000 receiving yards. That's hyper concerning in the 5th round. In the 7th round, it's 140 targets. Who cares? In the 5th round, it's, well, what did he do with those 140 targets? The mindset changes based on cost. And like you said, Aaron, team build. So, there's value lost in a lot of these receivers. And you can make similar cases for most of these guys as they increase, because now the players, you take them over at other positions, give you better leverage at that position, and potentially give you more season-long points anyway. We're shoving receivers far too high relative to total ADP. The last one is Antonio Gibson, who has been absolutely flying because of hype from Eric Bieniemy, whatever that means. And Brian Robinson's actually becoming a better value because of it. When me and Aaron made our running back rankings a few months ago, I had Gibson around RB like 30, I think it was, and I put Brian Robinson one spot behind him. Now that Brian Robinson goes after Gibson, he's far more draftable. And Gibson, it's just the roller coaster ride of Antonio Gibson, man. He was a 2nd round pick not a year and a half ago to start the offseason, and then just got buried. Finished last offseason in the 130s, 140s, started this offseason back in the 130s, and has now matriculated back up 30 spots, almost 3 full rounds, at least 2 and a half good rounds. He's back almost in the top 100, and he does go in the top 100 in a lot of drafts. And you've now taken Gibson, who we love Antonio Gibson on the show. We've loved Antonio Gibson for years. He's not a bad player. I'm not going to say that he's not worthy of praise or hype, but you have to be skeptical. He did have the 2 RB2 finishes early in his career. He's obviously an RB2 caliber player, and we think he can catch passes. And it's just now at a point where at pick 130, all you needed from Antonio Gibson was for him to be good enough, earn some type of role, and land in the end zone a few times. Now it's back to that Miles Sanders argument. He has to be an RB2 now to be worth a 9th round pick. He just does. The 9th round is where you see running backs that you expect them to hit their ceiling case, not to hit their floor case. You draft an Alvin Kamara, a Zach Charbonnet, an A.J. Dillon, a Samaje Perine, right? A Brian Robinson to be that RB2. And with Gibson, you have to be worried because of how the last couple of years have gone.
We love Gibson, but he's up 28 spots since the start of May. That's over 2 full rounds, right? And the thing that bugs me the most is that people's reasoning for reaching for Antonio Gibson is baffling. What do they say? Oh, well, JD McKissick, he had to retire because of a neck injury. Now that he's out of the way, Gibson can get more receiving work. Oh, Eric Bieniemy is now the play caller, and that's good for Antonio Gibson. It's BS. First off, with JD McKissick, he's been out since week 8 last season. He's been out. We have a sample size of 7 games after JD McKissick was out. Gibson, he was consistent. He either had 3 or he had 4 targets in a game. Those RB finishes, there was no upside, right? There was 2 games that he hit double-digit points. But Brian Robinson, on the other hand, the guy that we love to hate because, he's sluggish, he's not efficient, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, he hit double-digit points in 4 of those games. Brian Robinson had 20-plus carries, not touches, carries in 4 games. Antonio Gibson can't do that. That's not his skill set. He is the better receiver. Gibson should not have risen 2 rounds because of false narratives of JD McKissick being injured. He's been out. He has been a non-factor in Gibson's performance for half a season. And with Brian Robinson, it's half PPR, right? So the pass catching for Gibson doesn't affect him quite as much in this format. So Brian Robinson barely going up less than 3 spots. It pains me to say this, but we pivot. We now go Brian Robinson, who's going after Antonio Gibson. Robinson's going to get the touches.
I don't want to necessarily mislead. Up to this point in the offseason, I have about 18% exposure to Gibson in Best Ball Mania 4, and I had about a 3% exposure to Brian Robinson. Now I'm going to start drafting Robinson more because the cost has corrected and get him up to the 8-9% where he should be. And Gibson probably a little lower, closer to like a 12%, just not draft him as much. But if let's say you were doing your first draft today, similar to Madison and Mixon, it is a corrected ADP. Gibson should have always been at this price. So the warning is not, hey, don't necessarily draft him here. It's understand what you're getting and what we had. This was a player who was an easy pick because of his RB2 potential, but there's still a lot of downside. Like Aaron said, there's Brian Robinson, you have Curtis Samuel, you have an overall inefficient offense potentially with Sam Howell, a lot of unknowns for Antonio Gibson, and a player who doesn't necessarily have the affection of the head coach, even if he may of the offensive coordinator. Let's see how long Ron Rivera even lasts this season as the head coach. Maybe Eric Bieniemy took that job because he knows Rivera is a couple games away from getting fired. There's a lot of possibility here, but what's going to happen or potentially could happen, it's not to say don't draft him here. It's to say monitor him, monitor your exposure to him and to Robinson, and see how other people continue to react. Because what's going to happen is people who weren't looking at Gibson, who are analysts, are going to see this rise. They're going to look at Gibson. They're going to remember the player that Gibson is. Remember JD McKissick once existed. Remember the unfettered love for anything that has to do with Kansas City. And what are they going to do? They're going to come out and they're going to tout Antonio Gibson, not referencing the increase in ADP, just the talent in a vacuum. And then he's going to rise and rise and rise. If he continues to rise and reaches a point where, he ascends above a James Conner, above a David Montgomery, who have more solid RB2 floors, that's when you got to start being a little more hesitant and pumping the brake. And certainly you have to be alarmed at this rise, because such a drastic rise in such a short period of time is an indicator that there's something irrational going on among a large mass of drafters. So that's more so what I was getting at, Aaron. Unless you are saying entirely don't draft him, in which case, please have your day in court, my friend.
With Gibson, there's still talent. It's just you have to pump the brakes because of the drastic rise, because when these things happen, or any type of change in fantasy football, I always ask the question, why? You have to dig a little deeper. People have been doing narratives. And the other narrative, of course, is Eric Bieniemy. Oh, he's there, and there's going to be so much more passing game work for running backs. But when you look at last year's Chiefs, there's an awesome article on PFF talking about QB's running back target frequency. Patrick Mahomes and that Kansas City Chiefs offense that Eric Bieniemy had, The RB target frequency was 16.1%, which is in a tier that is properly called closer to league average tendencies, right? So Sam Howell, too small of a sample size to really put any merit on this, but his RB target frequency was 15.8%. So what are we really expecting from Gibson? It's the problem I have with this is that they've already gone to best case scenario of, oh, like Gibson's going to get all this work, and he might not. It may not even really change that much from last season. You still draft him because
totally
in best
right.
ball.
Nah, but about the work thing too, you got to consider Curtis Samuel's still there with a hybrid role. Now there is no tight end of relevance. Logan Thomas is dead to me, but Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin are really good at taking screens and short yardage plays. Also, this is going to be a generally short yardage distance offense. And like you said, there's no promise Gibson gets this massive volume role. And yeah, I think you said it perfectly without necessarily saying it. It's the false narrative. I would have told you in February, you can find a recording of me saying somewhere in February, hey, Antonio Gibson can catch passes. J.D. McKissick is going to be gone soon enough. Brian Robinson can only do so much. Gibson is certainly worthwhile to draft this late in draft. But now people are rising him because of words from Eric Bieniemy. That's stupid. That's not a reason to tout Gibson. And if you hear someone else give a Gibson take where they highlight Eric Bieniemy likes him, that's a bad take. It's a bad take. Even if Gibson ends up being an RB2, it's like when you get the right answer on a math test with the wrong formula. And at the very least, you should stray away from the wrong formula. And there's a lot of wrong formula going into this rise in ADP. Now, similar to Madison and similar to Mixon, they're still draftable. The ADPs before were just really wrong. And in a case like mine, and if someone else is in a case like mine, I already have 18% of high value Gibson. I have 12 teams with Gibson on him where I got Gibson in the 12th round and not the 10th round or the 9th round. I don't have to draft him here. And if you want to draft him here, it's fine. But just watch and don't reach on him. Don't be the reason he ends up in the 7th round.
That's going to conclude this episode of Stat Masters. If you haven't already, please like and comment on this video what you liked that we discussed today, and let us know what you didn't like. And subscribe to the Player Profiler YouTube channel. And we do the show live on Discord, and there is a section that's going to be specific to Discord. You should join the Discord server today. Go to playerprofiler.com/chat and join the Player Profiler Discord server. And from Aaron and Chris, we bid you adieu until next time.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out playerprofiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.